Hi, everyone. My name is Felicia Carbajal. I'm the Executive Director of the Social Impact Center. Super excited for this conversation in particular, and very grateful for ASA for stepping up and lending their voice to this conversation. Heather Despres. Despres. She just told me, and I'm still horrible. I mean, my last name is Carbajal, and it's actually Carvajal, and I don't give people too much about getting it wrong. So apologies on not pronouncing your name correctly. Super excited to have her with us today. Super excited to be a part of the Abilities virtual experience and having these conversations. Just so everyone knows, we are going to be recording this and sharing this with other audiences and people who have requested more information. Without further ado, I'm going to mute myself and let Heather take over.
Thank you, Felicia. So my name is Heather Despres. I am the director of the Patient Focused Certification Program at Americans for Safe Access. Americans for Safe Access is a 501c3 nonprofit based out of Washington, D.C. that has been advocating and lobbying for patient access to medical cannabis since 2002. And I have been there for coming up on 2 years in August. I run the Patient Focused Certification Program. We worked to develop standards for the cannabis and hemp industry. We originally started out focusing solely on medical cannabis operations, but then we've expanded to adult use and hemp CBD operations because we know that patients are seeking medicine outside of sometimes the medical route. And so we offer these industry standards and certifications. We are in the process of getting ISO 17065 accredited as a certifying body to really just continue to, progress standards in the cannabis industry. So we're going to talk about some information about medical cannabis and some different things that you need to know. And so I wanted to kind of highlight some of the top 10 things that we would want to be looking for. So kind of what are your state or country's cannabis rules or regulations? What are your rights as a medical cannabis patient? Things that your doctor may need to know, how cannabis works with the endocannabinoid system, different preparations and dosing, side effects, how to choose what's best for you, transportation, storage, and travel, understanding certificates of analysis and reading labels, and then also how to talk with your doctor, with your family, with your employer about your status as a legal medical cannabis patient. So here in the US, since 1996, 47 different states and territories have enacted some form of medical cannabis regulation, whether that is medical cannabis use, limited rules for CBD only laws, or all the way up to adult use regulations. Despite medical cannabis being legal in 47 states, it is still federally illegal. So this is one thing that people need to keep in mind, is that cannabis is scheduled as it is a controlled substance. It is a Schedule I drug listed in the Controlled Substances Act. And the federal government does not recognize the difference between medical and adult use cannabis. So even though the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018 has really kind of opened the door for CBD products to enter the market, the FDA is still figuring out a pathway for those products. And so they are technically legal, but there's a huge gray area around CBD products right now. So this is one of the reasons why doctors must recommend cannabis. They can't prescribe it. So you can get a prescription for all sorts of things, but you can only get a recommendation for medical cannabis. Some things to keep in mind is that your laws are going to vary by state, country, territory, and all the way down to local jurisdiction. In some states, it's legal. In some counties, where it's legal in the state, it is not legal. Some places let you cultivate your own medicine, some places don't. So one thing to keep in mind is to really familiarize yourself with what is allowed where you're at. Most of these programs in the US are run through the Department of Health or some type of similar program. Patients have to get that recommendation from their doctor, submit an application to their state, and oftentimes they have to pay a fee, which is one thing that we have really lobbied hard against, that medical cannabis patients shouldn't have to pay a fee to get a recommendation or to get a card issued from the state. These cards typically have to be renewed annually or biannually because you're supposed to be working with your doctor to talk about your condition and how medical cannabis is working as either a primary treatment or treatment of your symptoms. One really great resource, if you're really unclear about your state, is our State of the States report. So we issue this every year. It gives a grade about the state's medical cannabis program. So it reviews a whole lot of different things, including access, qualifying conditions, fees, is your product tested, packaging and labeling, those types of things. And so this is available on the ASA website, and it's a good resource to check and see. And it also can help you present it to your state regulators to say, hey, our state got like a D or an F, and we can do better. So it's a really great tool when talking with regulators and professionals about where you're at with the state. Qualifying conditions, these also vary. Right now, we have a qualifying condition tracker on the ASA website that has over 95 different conditions that you can get qualified for. When medical cannabis laws were first coming into the books, these HIV/AIDS, cancer, glaucoma, chronic pain, and epilepsy were some of the top conditions that were recommended. But what we've started doing is really kind of recognizing that this should be determined by your doctor. And so the way to change that in your state is to remove the qualifying conditions clause entirely and just say that this is a decision made between a patient and a doctor. And the doctor is the one who should be determining this, not some just list on a state qualifying condition. Many patients have had to go jump through hurdles to get their condition listed in their state regulations. And what we really want to focus on is your doctor making that decision, not based on what it is you actually are suffering from, but how can this help you based on what you're suffering from. Some things that your doctor should know, especially if your doctor has not received a lot of training. Most doctors receive very limited, if any at all, education about cannabis. And so a lot of them don't really know. And so you want to really kind of help them understand that cannabis has a high safety profile. There have been no known deaths that have been caused directly by cannabis. But there are some potential drug-drug interactions. CBD in particular is a potential inhibitor of cytochrome P450. And so if you are on drugs, medicines that are also acting on that system, you want to make sure that you're discussing this with your doctor so that you can avoid any potential interactions. And one thing to remember is that the First Amendment does protect a patient's right to talk freely with their doctor. This has been upheld in the Supreme Court not once, but twice. So your doctor is allowed to talk to you about cannabis. This has also been upheld with the VA doctors. VA doctors still cannot recommend cannabis, although there are a number of groups trying to change that. But VA doctors can now also talk with their patients about medical cannabis. So that just came out in like 2017, but the First Amendment and the Supreme Court decisions have already upheld that. And so that is now extended into there. One thing you'll find though is that some doctors have more experience in recommending cannabis as a treatment or as an adjunctive treatment option, and some of them don't. And so if you are looking for resources to point to your doctor, you want to either get them in connection with doctors that have that experience, connect yourself with those doctors, or give that information to your doctor so that they can educate themselves. Right now, this chart on the left is a list of clinical trials that are undergoing in the US. And as you can see, childhood epilepsy and epilepsy, especially drug-resistant epilepsy, is one of the really big things being studied right now, in addition to just seizure disorders. There's a lot of other studies that are being done, but here in the US, because it is a Schedule I drug, we really don't get a lot of opportunities to do proper research. And so right now, cannabis is really recommended primarily for chronic pain, seizure disorders, muscle spasms, but also looked at for poor appetite and weight loss, nausea from chemotherapy, all of these different things. So inside your body, we have what is known as the endocannabinoid system. And this is an endogenous system, meaning that it occurs naturally inside your body. Evolution has given it to us. And it helps monitor a lot of different body functions, including motion sickness, body weight, appetite suppression or stimulation, insulin secretion, neurodevelopmental signaling, inflammation, vasodilation, heart rate. It acts on a lot of different systems. And as you can see from the picture, you see we have two different types of receptors. We have the CB1 receptors, which are primarily located in the central nervous system. So your brain, your spinal cord, that kind of thing. It is also located elsewhere. And CB2 receptors are primarily located in your peripheral nervous system. And so these two receptors and how the cannabinoids act on them are going to play a very important role in helping to choose the medicine that's going to potentially best work for your condition. Cannabinoids, like I just said, they bind differently depending on how they are. From this picture, you can see THC binds directly into the CB1 receptor. And so it causes a specific reaction downstream. And depending on where in the body that CB1 receptor is located is going to determine the different type of activity that's going to happen in your body. And you may have heard a lot of people saying, oh, if you get too high, take CBD. The reason why people say that is because CBD actually blocks the receptor and changes the shape so that the THC can't bind to it. But one of the things to keep in mind with using CBD to combat any effects of THC is that they kind of need to be co-administered. So you have to wait for the receptor to release that THC that's already bound to it and get blocked by CBD if you do it afterwards. So there are over 100 different cannabinoids and 120 different terpenes that have been identified in the various cultivars of cannabis and hemp. And you'll notice that we use the words cultivar instead of strain. Strain is really more applicable to things like bacteria and viruses. Cultivar is just a cultivated variety. So you have different cultivated varieties of cannabis hemp, and these contain various combinations of cannabinoids and terpenes. Like I said before, scientific research in the US lags behind other countries because cannabis is a Schedule I drug. The DEA did just have a submission period for comments on how to increase the number of research programs that are providing medicine to researchers. And so hopefully at some point we will see the number of products being allowed by researchers in the US to really increase so that we can get some more of these high quality products used for these studies that our government so desperately needs so that we can actually really continue to legitimize this medicine. Two of the most common cannabinoids are THC and CBD. Those are probably the big ones that everybody's heard of, but there are a lot of other cannabinoids that possess medicinal qualities as well. THC, this is probably the most famous one. It was discovered in 1964 by Raphael Mechoulam. It is known for primarily its psychoactive effects on mood, behavior, and consciousness. And it is the cannabinoid that produces this euphoric feeling or the high feeling. CBD is probably the next most famous cannabinoid. It is non-intoxicating. Or non-psychoactive. It is the primary cannabinoid present in low THC chemovars. So you'll notice I'm saying chemovar here. When we're talking about chemovars, we're talking about a chemical variety, and that is one that has been tested that we know the chemical makeup of. So cultivar reverse to what the general makeup is, and the chemovar is like, we've actually tested it. We know the right amount here. CBD is effective in relieving convulsions, which is why we have seen a lot of research going into epilepsy and seizure disorders with CBD. CBN is a degradation product of THC. So when THC breaks down, if it's exposed to too much light, if it's exposed to too much heat, it will break down into CBN. CBN has some mild psychoactivity, they believe. It is known to decrease intraocular pressure and seizures. So CBN is beneficial for like glaucoma. CBC, cannabichromene, promotes the pain relief of THC and also has a calming effect. This is one of the lesser known cannabinoids. You don't see it in high concentrations in any of the plants, but sometimes you do find it randomly in different cultivars. CBG is actually a precursor to THC and CBD. So it's also can get produced in the plant as well. This is a big one that's starting to become more popular with people. You're starting to see a lot more formulations talking about CBG. It is said to have some sedative effects as well as antimicrobial properties, and is also known to lower intraocular pressure. THCV, this one is also gaining popularity because it tends to be appetite reducing instead of appetite stimulating. And so people are trying to look at this as an effective treatment for metabolic disorders, type 2 diabetes, obesity, that kind of thing. This one is also not generally present in high quantities, and it's not a very common one. You're likely not to find it on a whole lot of product labels. So we also have all these terpenes in here: limonene, pinene, myrcene, linalool, and they work together inside the endocannabinoid system to produce what is known as the entourage effect. And so one of the things when you're evaluating various cannabis medicines is, do you want a medicine with a singular drug compound, which is what we typically see in terms of like pharmaceutical drugs? It's like Tylenol has just one thing, acetaminophen, that's it. When we're looking at cannabis medicines, the entourage effect is that combination of all of the cannabinoids and all of the terpenes and how they work inside your body. And so if you're looking in here at this list of, you know, oh, I suffer from pain, so I want something that acts as an analgesic, I would like to look for something that has maybe CBD, CBC, and also something that has maybe myrcene, linalool, caryophyllene, these different things. And so as you're trying to look through and find the medicine that works, you want to start looking at all of the combinations. Historically, cannabis has been used for millennia. It was discovered in an ancient tomb. They've discovered it in ancient Chinese tombs, in the Egyptian tombs, in various pharmacopoeias historically. It was used to facilitate the birthing process, calm uterine pain, prevent miscarriage. And what we kind of see here from all these different studies done in the 1800s and all these doctors is all these doctors were using cannabis to help women with morning sickness, with hemorrhaging, with various issues during before and after having a baby. So we saw all these studies, and one of the sad things is that they stopped happening because in 1937 we had the Marijuana Tax Act, and then all of a sudden doctors were getting taxed for prescribing cannabis, and they didn't want to get taxed on it. And so they stopped prescribing cannabis when that happened. And then in the 1960s, when we had the Controlled Substances Act, we really saw cannabis get pushed away from any type of mainstream medicine, which is very unfortunate because we could have had another 100 years of research under our belt. So that being said, there aren't a whole lot of women's issues that have been studied with cannabinoids, and that's one thing that would love to see changed. But there are a few. So endometriosis, the endocannabinoid system, we do have presence of CB1 receptors in the uterus. There's a high concentration of them. There are also different CB2 receptors there. These expression levels will vary during your menstrual cycle. Anandamide is an endogenous cannabinoid. So anandamide is actually something that your body makes inside of itself, and it plays an active role in ovulation. And anandamide acts sort of like THC in the body. It can bind to CB1 receptors and produce that same sort of a response. So THC has also been evaluated, and one of the things to keep in mind is that most of these studies haven't actually been done on humans. They have been done on animals. There's been a lot of patient surveys that have gone out, but especially when it comes to women's health, they don't generally want to actually do this, which is really sad. Just part of why I got into science. But beta-caryophyllene, one study showed that it did cause apoptosis, which is cell death of cyst cells, and helped with pain reduction. Patient surveys have indicated a very positive response for people using cannabis to treat pain and inflammation caused by endometriosis. So that is a good start. With things like PMS, PMDD, Queen Victoria is probably the most famous cannabis patient. It's well known that she was given cannabis by her doctor to treat her menstrual cramps. And again, surveys indicate a very positive response in using cannabis to treat these. Pregnancy is a very, very different issue. Most of the studies that have come out have not generally shown too many fetal issues, but certainly women have used cannabis to treat their nausea and vomiting that's either associated with morning sickness or hyperemesis gravidarum. This is definitely one thing that you should talk to your doctor about. I mean, you should always be talking to your doctor about this, but if you are considering using cannabis during pregnancy, it is something that you want to make sure, especially if you're on any other medicines or doing any other treatments, we want to make sure that there aren't any drug-drug interactions and that your doctor is aware of everything that you're doing. And women are also using cannabis to treat their depression. But chronic pain is probably the other big one that people look at. THC has really been attributed to pain reduction. Many studies have shown that when you start putting medical cannabis into the rules and regulations, we see lower prescriptions for opioids being written. Studies have also shown that if you are using cannabis, it reduces the need for high dosages of opioids. And some people have seen even better treatment with the addition of a small amount of CBD to their THC medicine to help with reduction of pain. It is the most common recommendation written for medical cannabis for chronic pain, because pain is associated with a lot of different things. Pain isn't just, ow, I stubbed my toe. Cancer, chemotherapy, neuropathic pain, immune diseases, fibromyalgia, Hashimoto's. Chronic pain comes in a lot of different forms, and so that is why it is the most common recommendation. When you are looking at medicine, there's a lot of different terms that you're probably going to see. And so one of the things to keep in mind is that we really try to make sure that everyone in the industry is using the same language. However, if they're not, you want to make sure about the product they're getting. Typically, when people say full spectrum, they are looking at extracts that are made from flower and trim. And this is your whole plant medicine. This is all of your cannabinoids, all of your terpenes, everything in there. So you're seeing full spectrum whole plant medicine. Broad spectrum typically refers to extracts that have been purified to remove the THC from them, because a lot of people don't want THC, they want little THC. For CBD containing medicines, they want to make sure they remove the THC, particularly in states that don't allow high THC products. And some people just don't want the THC in their medicine. And then isolate is a singular purified extract. Typically, we see this with products that only contain CBD. But these are some terms that you want to keep in mind when you are evaluating different products. And for preparations and dosings, this is one area where the cannabis industry has gotten very creative. It's not just smoking flower if you're inhaling. There are vapes, there are different vaporizer cartridges, there are steam cartridges, there's volcanoes. There are a lot of different ways to inhale that aren't just taking a lighter and smoking a bowl. And so, especially in the abilities community, if you can't spark a lighter because you have arthritis or whatever the problem is, maybe a vape cartridge is more appropriate, or maybe ingesting products. There are also a number of sublinguals, topicals, transdermals. And there are very creative people. If there's a product type that you want that's not out there, I would encourage you to approach a dispensary, tell them to ask the manufacturer to do it. They are always looking for ideas for new products to put on the market. And so there are definitely a lot of options these days. And so, you know, we have raw flowers. People juice raw flowers. Very interesting, very way to get these raw cannabinoids. When people think of these different cannabinoids, they only think of the decarboxylated ones, the THC, the CBD, but before you decarboxylate them, they are THC acid, CBD acid. These also have medicinal properties. So in addition to just smoking raw flowers, people juice it, people put it in their tea. We can make concentrates, tinctures, edibles. I've seen suppositories and tampons. And so there are a lot of different ways for this medicine to get into your body. How do you choose? You really have to weigh, what product and delivery method are best for you. Maybe you don't want to smoke. Some people can or are unable to smoke flowers. Some people have just a very strong aversion to smoking and would prefer to eat them. Some people are unable to swallow pills, so capsules aren't going to work. Maybe they need to have an inhalation type of device. If you have limited movement, then sparking a lighter or loading a dab rig isn't really going to be convenient for you, but maybe being able to, push a button and turn on a volcano and steam distillation. Those things are going to happen. I think one of the big challenges with the cannabis industry comes in terms of packaging. When this industry first got started, they weren't really thinking about people who would have physical limitations and being able to open packaging. They were really just concerned about preventing children from accessing it. And so everything is in a child-proof container. They're unlike when you go to Walgreens and request easy open containers. That's not happening in the cannabis industry. So that is something to keep in mind, is making sure that you have the ability to get into the packaging that they're going to give it to you in. One other thing to keep in mind is how dosing is going to work for you. One study has shown that, if somebody took a CBD isolate, and this picture on the left really just highlights that at some point you have a peak response. So taking more isn't going to make you feel better. And this was a problem with isolates. But one of the things that they found is that when you added a little bit of THC into it, the dose response changed. And suddenly you got a linear dose response curve instead of a bell-shaped curve. And so depending on the dosage of medicine that you need, it may not be possible to reach peak if you are looking at just taking an isolate. You may have to look at adding a little THC or using a full spectrum medicine to get that linear dose response curve. So cannabis is not without its side effects, just like every other medicine out there. And just like every other medicine out there, it affects everybody differently. So if you experience uneasiness, If you get anxiety, if you have an increased heart rate, make sure you're in a comfortable and safe environment. And especially if you are new to cannabis and you don't know how it is going to react with you, make sure that you're in a comfortable and safe environment so that you don't have any outside anxiety potentially coming on you. If you do start to feel anxious, sit, lie down, breathe deeply, eat some food. Do try to avoid eating high sugar foods, as they can also cause issues. And if you are tracking your dosage, take less next time. If you experience hunger or thirst, dry mouth is very common. You want to drink water or natural juices. Again, this is to avoid this excess intake of sugar that we all don't need in our diets. If you don't like getting red eyes, you can use eye drops. If you get drowsy, maybe you need to consider scheduling your medicating appropriately so that you're not having to worry about falling asleep, for instance, if you're like at work or at school, or if you're able to just take a nap. On the counter side, some people experience sleeplessness. So instead of getting drowsy, they're wide awake. And in that case, just take less next time or try to avoid taking it close to bedtime. Short-term memory loss is another side effect of cannabis. So you want to avoid doing anything complicated, which is why all of these things also say avoid using heavy machinery, all that stuff. And then while some people do enjoy the feelings of euphoria, they may not always be appropriate if you're in a situation that requires you to not be giggling and not laughing or not feeling euphoric. Avoid medicating until the appropriate time. There are a lot of different factors that can impact the side effects of cannabis, including how much you've taken, the chemovar of cannabis that you've used, your method of consumption. For instance, direct smoking and inhalation is going to provide a quicker onset than if you were to eat. One of the things that people sometimes forget when they are consuming their cannabis by eating is that it does take a while for your system to digest that and for that to work its way through. And so you have to give it time to take effect. And some people think, oh, this isn't taking effect, let me take more. And then all of a sudden it all hits them all at once and they're freaking out. So your method of consumption is definitely a very important factor that's going to affect you. Your environment or setting. If you're in a high stress environment, you may have a slightly different reaction than if you are in a very calm, peaceful environment. Some people also have various experiences in history with cannabis. I've had so many people come and tell me, oh, I tried it this one time 20 years ago and it made me freak out and I didn't like it. And so they've just had this negative association with it. But when they say this isn't your dad's weed anymore, it really isn't, because it's not always just high THC products. There are low THC products that are going to provide a different experience than high THC products. And so there's all sorts of products in between. And so taking into account your experience and your history, that could affect you. And then your current mindset or mood and your nutrition or diet. How are you already feeling? That can also impact the side effects. So as we've mentioned, cannabis is only allowed in 47 different states, whether that be as CBD only, as medical, or as adult use. But one of the things that we all have to remember is that state lines are federal lines. And so traveling with cannabis is a very touchy subject. That's on our next slide. But right now, as far as storage goes, most states have very explicit storage requirements. So keep it away from your children, keep it away from minors, keep it away from pets. When you are storing, cannabis does degrade in the light, and so you want to store it in a cool, dry location out of direct sunlight or high heat, because that can reduce the potency over time. Edible products should be stored out of reach of children. You should always follow the instructions if they are provided, and also pay attention to if the product requires refrigeration or not. And one of the big state rules is that parents and guardians should always administer medicine to minor patients. Cannabis, most states that have medical cannabis, I believe all of them do now allow for minor patients. So if you do have a child that you think would benefit from medical cannabis, you are able to access that for them, but you do have to act as their caregiver and administer the medicine to them. When you're traveling with cannabis, you should never take it out of its exit packaging until you have arrived home. This is very key because you don't want to have, it's almost akin to having like an open beer in your car if you get pulled over. You also want to make sure that they are out of the reach of the driver, ideally in the trunk or a secure area of the vehicle. It is illegal to take cannabis products across state lines on airplanes and on most commercial methods of travel. This is because of federal regulations. State lines are federal lines, airplanes are governed by the FAA, and most commercial methods of travel also have some sort of federal oversight. So ASA did issue, last Thanksgiving, we put out a medical cannabis patient's guide for US travel. So it does discuss reciprocity in various states, as well as provide information on travel policies for some of the major travel providers. Reciprocity is one way that medical cannabis patients can benefit, because if you travel to another state, you should be allowed to access your medicine in that state. And since you can't bring it with you into that state, you have to feasibly procure it from that state. But some states will not take out-of-state medical cannabis patient cards. Some states will. And it's a very Byzantine process, but you want to make sure if you are traveling outside of your home state where you are a medical cannabis patient, make sure you know what the rules and regulations are for the place that you are traveling to. When you are at the store picking out products, or if you're ordering online, some key things to look for is a license number. And so on this picture, you can't necessarily see the license number on here, but it is over there in the corner. But you also want to look for a batch or a lot number. That is going to tell you when it was manufactured. You want to look for a state universal symbol, the contents, how much THC is in there, how much CBD is in there, ideally information regarding any of the other cannabinoids that are in there so that you know and are able to track this. Expiration dating, especially if it's a food product. You'll also see any warning statements and ideally a testing statement. Where I live here in California, there are a lot of producers who are not legally operating. They are not legally licensed by the state. And so one of the things that you want to do is make sure that if that license number is listed there, there should always be a license number, but verify it. All of the state programs will let you log in and verify a license number. So you can just go to the Department of Health website or whatever program is managing the medical cannabis regulations, and they will tell you if an operator is licensed by the state. They also may tell you if that operator has had their license suspended or revoked, or if they've had any product recalls. So you want to know this information so that you're purchasing products from the legal market so that the illicit market is not continuing to gain business. Because one of the things with the illicit market to keep in mind is that those products are not tested. There is no safety testing in the illicit market. So if you don't have the products tested, you aren't necessarily going to be guaranteed that you're getting a safe product. When you're at the dispensary, you could also ask for a test report or a certificate of analysis so that you can check and verify for yourself. This is very challenging. Every time I go to a dispensary, I ask for a certificate of analysis and very often get told no, I don't get access to that information. And so that is something that we are really looking to try and change. Some states are now requiring the use of things like a QR code so that somebody can scan that code and go look at the test report. One of the things to keep in mind when you're looking at the test report is that they can get very overwhelming. There's a lot of information on here, and there's a lot to take in, but there are some very key things to keep in mind when you're looking at this. So number one here is the license number of the laboratory. Laboratories have to be licensed in the state that they are operating as well. It's not just the cultivators, the manufacturers, and the dispensaries. Laboratories have to be licensed as well. So there should be a license number, some contact information, an actual location where they are physically testing these products. You want to know the name of the product. You want to know the sample ID. One of the challenging things about this industry is that when you test a product, it's not always guaranteed to be consistent across the entire batch. Some states will say, oh, I just have this one little tube of healing balm, and that's what I tested, and that's what this report is for. Check the test report to say, is this test report only for this sample, or is it for the entire batch of product? Because if it's for the entire batch of product, that means that multiple little vials of balm have been tested, or multiple samples of flower, or multiple sections of concentrate, not just that individual little container that was submitted to the laboratory. The other thing you want to look for, particularly, is just this summary of test reports. Did everything pass? So has it met whatever standard the state has set for those products? And then the rest of this is just kind of a breakdown of those different tests. So testing the cannabinoids, were terpenes done? Did they test for moisture, water activity, foreign matter? Did somebody from the laboratory sign this? Is the laboratory accredited? Most labs will list their different accreditations down here. You can see our wonderful friends at CannaSafe gave me their test report to use. They are a PFC laboratory certified company. They are also ISO 17025 accredited as a laboratory. So those different things you want to see. And then all of the different safety tests. So residual solvents, microbials, mycotoxins, heavy metals. A lot of tests get done. The key thing is you want to see, did this testing get done, and is the label saying what it is? One of the things that we have done here at ASA is we worked with the answer page to create a cannabis care certification program. And so this program is both medical professional education and patient and caregiver education. So our medical professional education has 4 CME credits that we do through the answer page. And then our patient and caregiver education is a series of short videos that introduce you to cannabis and starts with a lot of the basics. So Cannabis 101, identifying it, and also talks and reviews some of these different strategies about dosaging and how to choose the right medicine that works for you. This resource is also available. We offer this as a subscription service to dispensaries. So if you are a medical cannabis patient and you go to a dispensary, you could request that they enroll in this. When a dispensary enrolls in this program, they pay a monthly fee, and then their members and patients get access to this training for free. And so if you do use a dispensary, it is one way to help get them to provide training and education for everybody. There's a lot of different topics that get discussed in here. We talk about introduction to patient and caregiver education, the endocannabinoid system, cannabis-based medicines, how to choose it. And so we wanted to make sure that everybody had, you know, the knowledge that you need to do this. One of the other things that is helpful is tracking. So there's a lot of different probably apps out there that work to help track your medicine. We worked with Relief app to develop the Relief app, which helps you track and learn what types of cannabis dosing ingestion works best for you. So when you get something, you put it into the app, you track it, and then you can make notes. Did this work for me? Did this not work for me? How much did you consume? If you were eating, if you were inhaling, your method of consumption. And then this is a great tool to help talk with your doctor about, is this actually working for you? Because with that doctor-patient relationship, you want to make sure that, you know, this is working. Just like any other medicine, if, you know, Tylenol is not treating your pain, then you need something else, but you're wanting to talk to your doctor about what you're currently using to treat your pain. And that is the same for cannabis. So all of these names out here, that's where it gets confusing. You want to be tracking your THC and your CBD. And so this kind of helps you by tracking everything that's in there. And so this is a great resource to use, and then, share it with your doctor and help them work with you to figure out what's going to work best. So at ASA, we have a lot of different resources. And so these are just links to all of them. We have our State of the States report, our medical cannabis patient's guide for US travel. Last year, we did release a patient's guide to CBD. Excuse me. All of these are free on our website. You can also join ASA and get the newsletter, our monthly newsletter, our medical cannabis briefing newsletter. We also host an annual Unity conference. This year, we did have to make it a virtual event, but we are hopeful that next year we will get to see everybody in person. Our Unity conference is a way for medical cannabis patients to advocate and lobby on Capitol Hill to continue to change regulations to provide better access for them for their medicine. We've done it for 8 years now, and we do it every year. We have a lot of patients that really look forward to it. We do offer scholarships for some patients who cannot financially afford to attend, and so that is there. And right now we are offering free membership for cannabis workers and cannabis businesses as a way of saying thank you for being an essential business during this pandemic. If you're interested in learning more about ASA, you can reach out. Renal, it handles our membership and chapter information. ASA has chapters in every single state. Most of them are active. And if there isn't a chapter in your state, she can definitely talk to you about how to set one up. Debbie Turgai is our executive director. If you have questions about the cannabis care certification, feel free to reach out to her or myself. And if you are interested in the patient-focused certification program or info about ASA or anything else, that's me, Heather at safeaccessnow.org. And I'm happy to take any questions right now if anyone has any. And I see there's one already from Liz. So Liz, in terms of what is going to work for your neuromuscular condition, I would definitely start talking with your doctor. If you want to email me, I have some research papers that would be really good for you to show your doctor, and then you could really work with your doctor to help figure out what's going to work, and then start identifying the doses that you're taking. And this is where relief that can come in, is being able to track what you've taken and determine, is it working or is it not? And then that can help you determine, do I need to increase my dose? Do I need to decrease my dose? But I'm happy to share some research papers that I have with you to take to your doctor. Are there any other questions?
Come on, guys, don't be shy.
And if you are shy, feel free to email me. It's okay.
I guess I have a question, because I am, and I know you gave a lot of resources, but this is
so many
resources. We don't often talk about like menopause and premenopause, and when women are going through, their bodies are going through changes. Obviously people should be taking cannabis and logging all of these things in. Do you know if there's anything about just a starting point?
So I'm premenopausal. Yay, woohoo! Woohoo, 41. So I have been using cannabis for a very long time. I started with chronic pain from a leg injury, and then had a giant 12-pound baby who did a whole lot of damage. And so I have been using cannabis for a very long time to treat it. I will say that for me, I have found that a product that is hitting right around 20% THC with a very minor amount of CBD works for me. I prefer inhalation. So it really just depends. But I will say THC has worked a little better than CBD for me. But obviously everybody is different. I am also a fairly experienced user, so that is one of those things. But for premenopause, for hot flashes, my aunt was taking it forever. And THC solutions seem to work better for her in terms of that area as well. So at least for me and for her, the higher THC formulations. But if you're concerned about how high is too high in terms of like THC concentration, I would start with lower stuff. When I first started in this industry, everybody just wanted to have an upward trend towards the highest amount of THC possible, which is great for those people, but it's not always reasonable for everybody. Some people want that 8 to 10% THC solution because it's going to take the edge of the pain off and make you quite bearable to deal with, or at least that might be how my kids view me. But there are it's not all 30% THC. It's not all very high THC products. There are middle of the road, like 8 to 10, 12 to 14. It's just a matter of knowing what's there. It's really good to educate yourself. I know a lot of bud tenders receive hopefully some level of training, but they are bud tenders. They are not doctors. And so you want to make sure that you know what you're getting and what you're consuming. And so reading the labels and tracking this is very important. Can people with cystic fibrosis consume cannabis? I am not super familiar with cystic fibrosis, but if you are taking any medicines that are known to have drug-drug interactions, I would definitely talk about that with your doctor. But I do know that in terms of like the chronic pain that people may experience in their body, they may enjoy the relief that they get from cannabis. If I remember correctly, cystic fibrosis can affect your lungs. And so inhalation may not be the best delivery method. If that is a concern, choosing edibles or tinctures or sublinguals may be a more appropriate delivery method, but that's really something that you would want to discuss with your doctor, especially if you're on any medicines that may have a potential drug-drug interaction.
Any more questions? All right. Well, Heather, thank you so much for this very informative hour. Thank you so much for all of the resources. Like, a lot of people don't share the number of resources that you shared with all of us to be able to help us navigate this space in particular, especially with new consumers, people who are new patients, people who have varying medical conditions who are looking for options outside of what they've been given via their via pharmaceutical drugs. So it's I'm very grateful that you were able to spend some time with us this morning. Again, you can find Heather at safeaccessnow.org. She's a wealth of knowledge. I would definitely say if you have any other questions, reach out to her. If those of you who are here with us who didn't ask any questions, she's okay with shy, like she mentioned. Again, have a great weekend, everybody. I hope folks are enjoying Abilities Expo and have been able to check out the varying booths. This recording is going to be shared with everyone who has signed up for the booth, just so everybody can check it out. Thank you so much, Heather. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Or do you have any last parting words for us?
No, just thank you so much for inviting me, and thanks for listening. And feel free to check out ASA. Sign up to be for our free membership right now. Can't hurt. Get all sorts of information. And as a nonprofit, we wanted to make sure, a patient advocacy group, we wanted to make sure that everyone had access to this information, and so that's why we put it up there for free. If you can donate, yay. If you want to sign up for a free membership, go right ahead. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. If I can't answer it, I will definitely try to connect you with someone who can.
Fantastic. Thank you. And everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.